In honor of Memorial Day, we turn our focus toward our returning vets. The experience of military service and often combat can lead to a difficult readjustment when one is returning home. Many of our servicemen and women are able to transition smoothly, while some find it more difficult. What are the best services out there to ease the transition, and what programs and policies have proven most effective in reintroducing our heroes to their families and communities? Tonight, we celebrate those who sacrifice to keep us safe and secure. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. Joining us tonight are Marcus M. Smith, Veterans Outreach Specialist, Vet Centers, Houston, Beaumont. Sergeant Brian Escobedo, Veteran Career Coordinators, Lone Star Veterans Association, and Dr. Paul Schultz, Misher Neuroscience Institute and Memorial Hermann. Before we start, remember you can share your thoughts throughout the show on Twitter using hashtag Houston8. And welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
One thing I wanted to say, and I hope that we did it correctly in the open of the show, is to remind people that when we talk about issues that are faced by service members when they come back from war zones or active duty, that a lot of people come back and are reinstituted into communities perfectly fine. And that there are things that happen to some people that don't have as easy an adjustment. But by no means are we trying to say all service members are having issues, correct? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to start with Doctor, and I'm going to ask you, you were saying, though, but it is a high percentage that do face some sort of, higher than in the general population.
Yeah. There's a number of challenges that people come back with. PTSD is perhaps the one that people have heard about the most.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic, and it's about maybe 22% of people returning. So it's a significant number. And then in addition to that, there are folks who have depression or anxiety and traumatic brain injury and so forth. So we certainly want to have the emphasis on the positive, but as a healthcare provider, I don't see them as much. I see the folks who have the challenges of integrating back.
And percentage-wise, putting them all together, how many?
It's difficult to say. With PTSD, we've studied it enough to know that it's about 22%, but certainly it's something around 10 to 15 probably with the rest of them. So it's over a third of folks who have a challenge. And each of those things, as you can imagine, makes integration back into the family unit, back into the work setting and so forth, a challenge. Depression, as you can imagine, would distract people from interacting. It would make it difficult to have an intimate relationship with your spouse, for example, coming back. PTSD does the same thing. A lot of servicemen with that condition talk about having sort of a numb feeling, and obviously that would be something that would make it really difficult to come back and have a loving relationship with your family again.
Before we get too far into all of this, and oftentimes when people talk about what are termed mental illnesses, that you have to have a pre-existing condition when you suffer from mental illness of any sort. I'm wondering, when you're looking at troops, when you're looking at folks that have been in the service and they have these issues, are they people who have had to have a predisposition for some problem and something starts it, something instigates it, or is it something in the activity that starts the journey for them at that point?
That's a really good question. So what we know is that if you've had prior traumas, psychologic traumas like rape or being assaulted and so forth, or childhood abuse, that definitely increases the risk that when you're in the theater that you'll develop PTSD out of it. But we also know a lot of people don't have those. And it seems to be sort of a universal phenomenon that about 20% of people, regardless of their background, will have this reaction, and it's different than other folks. We're trying to understand what the variables are that would predict the person that has that, to try to understand it better and maybe be able to intervene sooner or perhaps even prevent circumstances in the theater that might invoke PTSD. Right. We haven't quite figured out all those. We know genetics plays a little role, past history plays a little role, but on top of that there seems to be other variables that are peculiar to the person and hard to explain.
So Marcus, what I would assume is that just from my armchair watching from a distance, I would assume you go into a war setting, you're going to see very difficult things, and of course it's going to affect you. How are we separating between somebody who is just affected by what they see and where they are put to somebody who actually has a problem and needs help?
Well, I would say that we've been, as service members, because I know once I deployed to Iraq, I know that when we were over there, we were doing different we had different jobs. Okay, some of us, we stayed in what's called garrison. We stayed inside of protected areas, and some of us went outside, as we call it, outside the wire. And so the numbers that were exposed to, combat versus those that were more of I'd say in a passive nature, but being in the combat theater, weren't as exposed as some of the others, as we would say, and Brian knows this. When we talk about the grunts, the ground pounders, they were the one that were exposed to the day-to-day traumas, dealing with, IEDs and things of that nature. While you had the support elements, they were there and just supporting them. So some of them, needless to say, had greater exposure than others, and you can tell the difference. Sometimes you can't tell the difference once they get back, and the doctor probably would testify that in some cases PTSD or traumatic stress or combat stress or whatever the case may be may manifest itself days, months, even years later. And it could sometimes, I'm not a medical professional, we leave that to the people at our vet centers. But I do know that some different things trigger those traumas, such as a smell, a sound, or other things could do it also.
Okay, Sergeant, now when we're looking at this, and when I even started on this whole plan for this particular program, I'm thinking to myself, everybody that goes into, as we call it, the theater, are exposed to things that are not easy to see. And some people come back and adjust better. Do we have any idea what policies, what things that are done that help those that adjust better to coming back into the community? Or is there no correlation that you see there?
Well, there's two things. When you separate from the military, you go through a transitional class when you get out, and most people go through that, some actually don't. And during that class, you have to understand, it might be in any state of the country that this base that you're separating from the military is from, and then you go back to your home state and your hometown. So there's not actually a liaison to guide you from that point to the other point to receive you when you come home. So organizations like mine, the Lone Star Veterans Association, we make it a point to go out and find those veterans and then integrate them into the veteran community here in Houston. It's a model that isn't seen all over the United States, which is something that we want to promote as a national thing, that in every major city there's an organization that receives the veterans as soon as they come home. But unfortunately, it just doesn't exist yet. We're a pioneering organization. But I think that the biggest problem is that you're told, these are some resources and things that we suggest that you do. Goodbye, thank you for serving your country. Right. And then you come back, and luckily here in Houston we have the OIF, which is Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom Clinic. So when people come here to go to the VA, they're instantly put with the OIF and OEF category, so they get help to transition a lot better than the average person. Unfortunately, though, not 100% of veterans do go to the VA right when they get out.
And you bring up the VA, and it's funny, in doing my research, of course, we always have the Hollywood version of these very difficult institutions where it's harsh on the people that come there and they're uncaring. But the truth of the reality is that actually the VAs are very good hospitals, higher rated than a lot of other hospitals. What can you tell me about that?
Oh, yeah. Particularly at this VA, I was there about 25 years, and they have an outstanding leadership team there that worked very hard to make sure that it was the best quality of care that you could give. And some of the old stereotypes really moved by the side there. Also, frankly, it's the same physicians that are around town here. We all would go there for a couple days each week and take care of folks. So they were getting, the veterans there were getting the people who hopefully had the most knowledge about the disorder that they were being seen for. And also, I have to say, I never had an insurance company say that I couldn't order a test that I thought I needed. At the VA system, they're very good about it. If the doctor's saying you need a test, an MRI or whatever, you can get it. And so we could really offer them the best diagnostic and therapeutics here at the VA.
Do we find that veterans tend to want to seek out other veterans? If you come back from wherever and you have served, is it a community that wants to stay together, or is it one that's challenging to get them to be back together? What do you guys find?
Well, I would say, and Brian has alluded to it, because I'm also a member of the Lone Star Veterans Association, and it's a program, it was founded just because of that. What we wanted to do was to develop an organization that's, not like VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, or American Legion, some of those older organizations that have been around for a while. What we want to do, we want to kind of model those, but put a contemporary spin on it. So we want to hang out with other veterans such as ourselves that have been to Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, but we want to do different things, and we want to have a different culture. At first, our motto was, this is not your grandpa's organization, but we changed that because we know we had to, the model that we want to develop, we want to reach out to all our veterans, but we want to concentrate on newer veterans. Brian?
Right, and we find, just speaking on that, it is very difficult when people get back, they don't know where the other veterans are. I know certainly when I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't know where to find people. Luckily I went to the VA, and I got contacted by LSVA in college. We all have access to the GI Bill, so most of us go to college, and that's where we really interact with a lot of the young veterans returning and going through the transitional process. We're also working on a media campaign right now, trying to get our name out there, but from 2009, we had 4 members, and now we have over 3,500 members in 2012. So we're doing something right. Yeah. There are over 30,000, above 30,000 Iraq and Afghanistan vets in Harris County, and we have 1/10 of them in our organization. So we're reaching out. Now, I'm speaking for Houston. Now, as far as the rest of the United States, I couldn't say, and I know that we are a pioneer organization, so it's a lot easier for vets to find other vets here in this community, considering we're the second largest in the entire United States of military veterans, than in other smaller communities.
Well, that's another good point. The size of our veteran community is huge here, second largest in the country. You were going to say, Doctor?
I was going to say that there's very good evidence that the support system to which one comes back is important for actually reducing the risk of PTSD, as an example. And one of the mechanisms that's been identified support-wise is actually veterans talking to other veterans.
Absolutely.
Right? And those groups are, I think, very important for reducing that.
Help me with this stereotype that's out there. And a lot of people feel, I think Hollywood has done a horrible service here, is where these returning vets are all going to snap in a minute, and they are dangerous. And so when it comes to getting into the job force and going back to work, there's the part of it is, oh, yay, military, there are heroes, don't hire them. But the truth of the matter is that they're actually better employees. So how do you guys, in your jobs, help to bridge that gap between what people think it is and the reality of the situation is you want to hire vets?
Well, part of what I do in readjustment counseling services at the Vet Center is help veterans transition. And part of the biggest transition, especially the newer veterans, and now that's transitioning either getting out of the military, coming back from the combat zone, or doing a transition in place. They may have come from a different area of the United States and they come to Texas and they're trying to take advantage of their benefits. What we do there is the part of the readjustment portion of it is help them out with finding jobs. What we do is get out into the community, get out into the find out the organizations that are hiring that are veteran friendly, and then we try to link them up together. And I like to do a warm handoff. I tell my veterans, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you I'm going to qualify whoever I'm talking to. I want to make sure that they actually are looking to hire veterans. And then once we do that and I qualify them, then I give them a warm handoff. I don't like, those organizations that just collect resumes because, again, they think about some of the veterans that they're going to get. Oh, they keep hearing the terms PTSD. Do we want to hire him? Is he going to go crazy on the job? And that's not always the case.
Not always the case.
That's not always the case.
And that's the funny thing, too, because you read the research, and hiring vets is good for your business. They are very dedicated, very loyal, hard workers. But that stigma must be a problem. Are the vets faced with it? Do they come and they talk to you and say that this is an issue they have, that there's a stereotype against them because they are vets?
It does happen. We do see that sometimes, unfortunately. Luckily, the state of Texas is a very veteran-friendly state. So I think that other parts of the United States would experience a higher degree of that sort of prejudice than right here in our hometown. So you still do see it, but what we do to prevent that, we know that that's out there. So what we do, just like Mark is here, we actually train the guys. So we give them resume workshops. We give them interviewing workshops where we teach them fully what to expect and have real-time interaction with these guys and show them how to do mock interviews to make them proficient in interviewing. And also, we have classes to introduce them to corporate culture and the difference between the military and the corporate world, because you can't take some methods that you use in the military, like yelling at a young private.
Yeah, they won't let us do that anymore, I tell you. It's no fun.
So pretty much we take the sand grinder down and we smooth over those rough edges, and we prepare them for the corporate world, and then we link them with the best companies that we can find. I personally hand select companies in the Houston community to actually hire veterans with my program, the Warrior for Life luncheon. So we actually just had that today. We had about 50 companies come out, and the rest of them were veterans, about half of them out of 100 people. And so half of them were Houston companies, and even some of them are corporations, but they're coming out. They're knocking at my door. They're knocking down. They're calling my phone. They're emailing me all the time. They want to hire veterans in Houston. So that's one thing I can speak from firsthand experience is that the Houston business community is highly motivated to hire veterans.
Okay, job work done. It's off my checklist. Back over to PTSD. I want to talk a little bit more about that in the fact that we've talked about a lot, and when we think of our returning troops and such, do we see a difference between women who are returning? Now we have a much larger women population out there working in the armed forces. Do we see a difference in their reaction? Is it the same? Is it more or less? What are you finding?
Yeah, the symptoms of PTSD are very similar, but the rate is slightly higher in women.
Oh, really?
We don't know exactly why that is, if it's because they're exposed to more challenges out there. Potentially they're smaller and they are female and they could be taken advantage of. That's not clear, but the net effect is that they do have a higher rate of PTSD, and so they should be watched more carefully. I did want to add, too, in a positive sort of way, the folks who do have symptoms of PTSD often don't recognize it as such. We talk about it as though it's something everybody knows about, but the truth is a lot of guys I see, or gals, they come in for a headache or problems concentrating or problems with memory, and as we sort of pull the onion peel apart, we found out that they've got something underlying that. And so if you are one of the guys who is trying to get a job and having a challenge at it, one possibility is that there may be something distracting you. You may not, in fact, be able to focus the same as the other guys who are getting the jobs and all that. And that might be an opportunity to talk to your healthcare provider in a positive way to see if you are having a symptom that can be treated like depression or anxiety. As you can imagine, it's very hard to focus on a job and a task in front of you if you're not feeling good. It'd be like if I found out that my loved one was sick before I came here. It'd be very hard to concentrate on our conversation. Well, someone with depression or anxiety has that going on all the time. But if we treat it, then it allows them to...
Take me just a step back, and I'm assuming, we go into this conversation assuming everyone knows what you mean when you say post-traumatic stress disorder. But actually, take me into it. What exactly are we talking about? What are the things that set it off? What are you seeing when you're not at home, when you're in the theater? And how do those things then turn into these physical problems?
I'll give you a good example. That's a really good question. I saw a young man who came in with headaches, and he had an injury to his leg that was slowly healing. He had been back about 3 months, and he said on the side there, I was asking him normal headache questions like, are you under stress? No. But he wasn't sleeping very well, and I asked him about the sleeping, and it turned out he was having nightmares related to what had happened before. He had not had them in Iraq at all. He hadn't had them for several months before he came home, but now he was starting to have insomnia and dreams about what was happening there, and wasn't sleeping very well, and the net effect was it was giving him a headache. But for me, the positive point was I could tell him that he was having symptoms that might be relevant to PTSD. Then we would ask him other things. So they're re-experiencing the phenomenon through that kind of circumstance. But the second set of things that they may do is avoid circumstances that remind them of it. In fact, they may even avoid being around other veterans because it may remind them of the theater. They may avoid movies. They also will avoid feelings, which we think is sort of a defense mechanism. We talked earlier about how they might have a little more problem with interpersonal stuff, and they might feel a bit numb. That could be part of the spectrum also. So I would ask a guy like that how it's going with his relationships.
So you could very easily be misdiagnosed. You could be thought to be having insomnia or stress or anxiety.
Headaches, yeah.
And be treating each of those things without realizing that the underlying problem is actually what they witnessed and experienced before. So then is the therapy, is the work to try and heal their memory of this, to try and help them deal with that, and then the rest of this will go away? Is that what we are assuming?
That's one of the big things we do in the system for treatment in the VA, is have people sort of re-experience it in a controlled circumstance. So they talk about it and they write about it and think about it, not to such an extent that it actually makes things worse by bringing it all back all at once, but by digesting it slowly, we think that their brain is essentially re-remembering the circumstance and digesting it, so to speak, and coming to a different conclusion about what it means for their civilian life here.
Ken, let me ask the other gentleman also. Families hear this now, and there are wives and husbands and children who are dealing with family members who suffer from these things. Would it make sense for them in some way to try this type of a therapy on their own, trying to get their loved one to open up, to talk about it, or is this something they really should seek help for?
Well, we encourage family members. In fact, we target family members nowadays. We have marriage and family therapists at vet centers now. And one of the things is we've noticed that in order to get the veterans to come in, you have to reach out to the families. Because, you know, if I've been in the combat zone, I'm not going to say, hey, I have PTSD, I have combat stress, you know, I have, you know, depression. I'm not going to jump up and admit that. But my wife, she would say, hey, you know, you do have anger management issues or something like that. So the families be more willing to come and get that service member to come over.
But, okay, Marcus, I'm your wife now. Sorry about that. So I have to go for the example. And I'm saying to you, what's wrong? Talk to me. Tell me about it. Should I be asking you? Should I be trying to get you to talk about it? Or should I simply recognize what the situation is or try to, and then seek outside help?
As with anything, I would say you're probably not equipped to help me handle it. Even though no matter how much you want to try, you're probably not equipped to do it. So yes, I would say seek help. And what we do is we talk to those family members and give them tools because we have a therapeutic approach. I mean, we don't use medicine. I mean, we can get medicine if need be, but we try to have a therapeutic approach, techniques, strategies to get the veterans to confront, you know, and deal with those issues that they've gone through. But we wouldn't recommend that you do it yourself unless you're a licensed professional.
Right.
Now, adding on that point, the VA actually has something that I was very proud to take part in called the Make the Connection campaign. If a spouse or a family member or even a neighbor were concerned about their loved one having PTSD and they know that they're not going to the VA and addressing their issues as they should, MakeTheConnection.net can show you stories. It's a very good source to research what PTSD is. And you have stories from combat veterans such as myself telling about my tale of how I readjusted and integrated back into society using the programs that are out there. And also, the best thing about it is it's a crisis tool as well. So, for instance, if I'm talking to my neighbor and he's going through crisis, he has PTSD, he's a veteran, I can look on that website, type in my zip code, and within 50 miles it'll show me a great deal of chaplains and people that can be there for you 24/7, that can help you out, actual professionals that are on call 24/7, and that ultimately they can walk you into the VA. And then, of course, it goes back to the community. I think that one message I would have for the community would definitely be educate yourself about what this is. MakeTheConnection.net is a wonderful tool that people can use to actually learn about it and learn how they can help people in their community as well.
Did you find that you had any issues when you came back?
Certainly, yeah.
So I look at you, well-adjusted. You're out there. You even went to a luncheon today. You know, everything's good for you. How do you make the transition? And do you feel that you are, and I hate to use the term, do you feel healed? Do you feel like it has been solved?
I do. I mean, I think that it'll never go away. Just like anything, you don't forget the first time you were bullied, or you don't forget the first time you got into a fight, you know. So they don't go away necessarily, but you manage them. Just like now, if someone were bullied and you're a grown adult now, it might not bother you so much because time has passed. But the difference here is that with me personally, I did find it very difficult to adjust when I first came out. I mean, I did 3 tours, you know, and I'm a Purple Heart veteran as well, meaning that I got injured while I was at war. You know, I went through a great deal of trauma, but the thing is that I wanted to get better. My wife really encouraged me, and she I always tell people, if you don't know if you have PTSD, ask your wife, ask your husband, ask your family, and right. if they tell you, then yes, by all means, go take care of your business, you know. Yeah. But I full-heartedly dedicated my life to healing myself, and so I was very active I was very proactive in seeking help and actually full-heartedly taking it seriously and taking the advice that was given to me. And you know, here I am today, and I can tell you, I'm doing great. You know, I don't really suffer from depression anymore. I'm helping people in my community. I'm doing great things for people, and I think that ultimately, healing yourself but then giving back into your community is the best thing you can do.
Yeah. And you were going to say yes, Doctor?
Can I ask, you mentioned that you had suffered from depression. Did you recognize it, or was your wife the person that helped you realize that?
It was definitely my wife. When I realized that PTSD, I was actually in the hospital in Baghdad. I got medevac from an IED. I was pretty badly injured. I got medevac to a hospital, and I remember limping around and being really injured, you know. And I saw a giant poster that said, "These are the symptoms of PTSD." Now, I had been on 3 tours, and each one 5 months in between, so I didn't have time. And each time I got more of a rank and more responsibility, so I couldn't think about myself. I just thought about my men. I didn't have time to go to counseling because I needed to be there for their training to ensure that they would come back home and that they had the best training possible. So, and this is very common in the military, that people don't have time to think of themselves. But a time comes when you do get out. And I remember seeing that poster and looking at the symptoms, and my heart just broke. I was like, I am experiencing every one of those symptoms, and I had no idea what it was. So I didn't, and not until I saw that poster. But that was me being educated.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of times people don't have those resources. They don't know where to find them. So once again, it's our responsibility to spread the word, and I'm glad that I'm on this program to do exactly that.
And we have about 30 seconds left, and since you bring it up, the symptoms, if you can run through them real quick, things to look for.
Re-experiencing nightmares, interpersonal problems, a whole host of hallucinations even we see. Depression is real common. Avoiding circumstances, avoiding thoughts, avoiding people, avoiding things that remind the person of them.
And so if you experience those or things like that, seek help. It can be much better. It can be, we need to help you. You all out there helped us. And so we appreciate the service and our servicemen and women. And we thank all of you for coming in today. And now each week we invite you to visit our home online at houstonpbs.org/Houston8. There you can read about the guests, learn more about the topic, and even watch past episodes. And that does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for joining us.